Meeting of Independent School District 535 School Board is called to order at 5:31 p.m. Tuesday, October 18th, 2022, in room 137 of the Edison Building. Board acknowledges this site and all RPS sites are situated on the ancestral land of the Dakota people, and we honor the Dakota nations and the sacred land of all Indigenous peoples. Interested members of the public are welcome and encouraged to view this meeting remotely at youtube.com/ISD535, where the live stream video may be found. Present at this meeting are school board members, Superintendent Kent Pickell, a non-voting ex officio member. In the absence of Assistant School Board Clerk Michelle Severson, Clerk Barlow, would you please call the roll?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. That's a good answer.
Director Atkinson.
Here.
Clerk Barlow, here. Director Garcia.
Here.
Treasurer McLaughlin. Chair Marvin.
Here.
Vice Chair Nathan.
Here.
Director Workman.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, we offer the opportunity to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2.01, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Agenda is approved. This evening, there are no comments to the board. We will move on to 4.01, Board Member Committee Update. Are there any board members who have information they'd like to share about committee work they've done? I know the Policy Committee has significant amount of information to share later, and we're waiting anxiously for that.
As always.
As always. Ms. Workman.
Are you sure you don't want to hear twice from the policy committee tonight?
I'm pretty sure,
Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
I'll defer to you.
Okay. Oh, that was it.
And the insurance trust will have essentially its own item.
Wow.
I was fortunate to be able to attend the community engagement committee, the family engagement that our district has. And there are so many wonderful things going on in this district that involve parents, staff, community members, and the interaction between those groups. One elementary school reported that they were doing a fundraiser of selling pumpkins, and that CCAP's Orchard donated 150 pumpkins, but the caveat was that the students would have to harvest them, not just pick them up from where they'd already been displayed, but to harvest them. So they partnered with students from the Alternative Learning Center. These are high school kids who know about agriculture, and together they and the elementary school kids picked the pumpkins. Another group of students washed the pumpkins, and they're selling them for a fundraiser. We also heard from Lisa Weber, who is retiring from the school district. She has served as what we have called in the past a truancy officer. And it was amazing to hear from her about the work that she has done for many years with the school district, including the fact that when a student has been missing a substantial amount of school, she and her team, she is the team, do everything they can to keep that student out of the system. They try to look at what the symptoms are, what's causing the student to miss school. Is it transportation? Is it a language barrier? Is it some other family issue? And to work with that. So the focus is on getting those kids back to school rather than punishing them for their behavior. We will miss her in this district. Any other? Okay. We'll move on to 5.0, the consent agenda. Any issue to be removed for separate consideration?
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. 6.0, focus topic. Today we are going to be looking at school continuous improvement plan from early childhood. Dr. Pickell.
Thank you, Dr. Marvin and board members. While we get moving here and I try and just frame things a little bit, I'd like to invite Erica Schumacher, who's our Manager of Early Childhood Family Services, and Jennifer Erke, who's our Director of Special Education for Early Childhood, up to the table as they will be guiding us through their great work. Every once in a while, you read something or hear somebody who says, education never changes, and it's been the same for 100 years, and we have the system that is just resistant to all change and growth. And I think, in fact, there have been, over the last several decades, several areas in which we've had a complete paradigm shift. And I think there's no area more important or powerful than early childhood education. When I started as a teacher in the early 90s, the notion that you would have systematic early childhood education, especially for students growing up facing significant barriers to education and development, was unheard of. But thanks to a lot of great practitioners and some really smart researchers, we've realized that the gains that accrue to our youngest learners in brain development, social emotional development are off the charts, that the neural connections in their brains are constantly evolving and developing, and so we want to have absolutely high quality programming, and we want to serve as many of them as we possibly can. So as you know, in our board meetings, we are alternating our focus topics between the system change initiatives that run across our schools and then the improvement work that's happening within them. And so tonight we have an opportunity to dig in our second one of these. So thank you for being brave and willing to move forward, building on the great work that Elton Hills gave us a glimpse of last time. We have our second overview of the improvement work that's happening. Board members dove deep last week into our new approach to school improvement. And I just want to connect the dots between that discussion that we had and this one to say, this fall we are by design in beta mode in terms of our school improvement processes. And we are doing so because in particular we want to honor the work that schools and programs were already doing even as we move into our new system. And so what you saw in the plan in board docs and what I'm sure we're going to hear about now is not yet perfectly aligned with where we want to be a year from now in terms of goals that are very clearly measurable and levers that are very tightly aligned with the goals and that are not so numerous that we kill our educators because of the work, and that ultimately will include timelines and plans. That's where we're headed in this direction. The content that is in this plan is so rich and there's so much to build upon. But I want to ensure the board that as we work with Eric and Jen and their colleagues over the next year, we'll be helping to take this great content and put it into the kind of format that the board talked about at its recent study session and meeting. Final point, when we did our strategic plan last year, we very much included feedback from families with young children and our educators in early childhood. And for me, very interestingly and convincingly, the change initiative, the big district change initiative in our early childhood work is actually not significant change in the nature of our programming. It's very, very strong. It's that we've got to find creative new ways to get our low-income families to that programming, and that the biggest barrier we face is actually transportation. And so that is the strategic plan change initiative in the early childhood space, and that will go into high gear next fall. And in the meantime, we are really grateful to you for giving us an overview of the work that you're doing now. So with that, Erica and Jen, thank you, and let's dive in.
I know. Here we go. I may not even know how to use the clicker tonight. So I'm Erica Schumacher, and I am the Early Childhood Family Services Manager.
Jen Erke, Director of Special Education for Early Childhood.
So when we came together as a SCIP team this year, we knew that we would end up having to grow, and we've started to do that work. The initial group that started this plan included some of our instructional coaches, some of our teachers, and then we are expanding that to include our educational assistants, ESPs, parent educators, some of our B3 team that were not present, which is our birth to H3 group. So when we think about where we start and how we're going to grow, we're going to have so much more rich feedback from the larger group as we continue.
When we look at early childhood, it means birth all the way through age 5. And so we're talking about our educators that go into family homes and coach parents, but we're also talking about preschoolers that are coming into the buildings. We also have infants, toddlers, and preschoolers that come into buildings with and without parents. And so it encompasses a large group of our youth before they even enter the K-12 program. All right, so when we look at our first goal, actually both goals, they're really focused more on the adults. And what we know is that in early childhood, the adults have a lot more control over the environment, which as a result then will impact the learning that takes place with our children and families, whether it be in homes or on our school campuses.
So the goal we're going to focus on tonight is our first goal, which is to significantly increase the utilization of curriculum and tools with fidelity to foster high-quality learning environments for all learners, which does not mean that we're not using our tools really well. What it means is that we want to take a look. After 2 years of adjusting and shifting, we made some changes to make sure that we could service people at home in a really short, quick burst versus what we do in the classroom. And so this, through conversations with the team who attended the SKIP retreat, is to really pull back and refocus and make sure we're using our tools really well to serve our families.
When we talk about our tools, some of them are curriculum, some of them are assessment tools, and a couple of them are actually state innovation. So if you look on the middle there where it says classroom engagement model and equip, those are two state innovations that we've been using in early childhood for the past 6 years. And we're actually now in the maintenance phase of that. And so we're still using them. Our classroom engagement model is for our preschoolers in the buildings, and our equip model is what our practitioners are using in the homes working with our families and children.
So when we look at our first lever, which is about professional development, part of that is to make sure that our teachers and our ESPs and our EAs feel very confident in the work they're doing and making sure that we have everybody trained up as best we can. One of the interesting things that came out of our very first meeting after we grew our team was exactly that. Like, I don't know if everybody feels confident in their work, and if we could get anything out of this goal, it would be to make sure that every person who steps into the classroom has the tools they need and feel extremely confident. And that's an area of growth for us. We do a really great job. We have a really great training plan. But we know that there are times where we hire really quickly and put someone into a classroom and we kind of catch them up later. So having a very thorough plan about how we'll move forward is a part of this. Also with that, our curriculum has a fidelity tool that we can use to measure how we're doing. So we're gonna just start utilizing it. It hasn't been a part of our practice in the past. So we're gonna pull that out. We're gonna let teachers select goals that they wanna work on. And then we'll follow up with them and make sure that that informs the PD we're providing them to just fill in those gaps.
Right, and the second lever we're focusing on is the SEL lever. And these tools are really set up to build positive relationships, both with children and with families. Staff use these tools and resources that we have available so that they're able to enrich what's already going on in the classrooms and in the homes. And when we think about using the tools we have available, it's things like we have parent educators. Why can't we have the parent educators working with our teachers so that they know how to better work with those families and help the parents when they're in the homes and at parent conferences and having those conversations with them. So it's little things like that, knowing what we have available and then being able to use it moving forward to make improvements.
For the final lever we're going to share, we picked 3 of our top ones that we're really focusing on, and this final one is families because it's the heart of the work that we do. And so our tools are actually set up to engage the family, not only in what we're doing in the classroom, to give them tools within their home, to try what we're doing in the classroom at home in a different way. And so to just make sure that staff feel like they have the access and the time to get those tools to families. And then the flip side of that is we also really have a curriculum that makes parents leaders So making sure we invite parents into our classrooms to lead on a skill that they know. And our curriculum is very clear that anybody who knows more than a 3, 4, or 5-year-old is an expert in that area. And so they can come in and be an expert for their children and for other children. So really utilizing the skills of the families that we have to just help further develop the work we're doing.
All right, so as we look at next steps, for goal 1, our initial step is really for the teachers to kind of take a look inside and do a self-evaluation and identify goals that they know that they need to work on to improve what they're doing in the classrooms every day. We have our instructional coaches who go in and help support them as well. And then finally, we are going to be doing planning on the outside so that we can have professional development in place for the teachers to be able to access the areas of need that they have identified for themselves.
And we are already in movement on goal 2. So we just wanted to share what we're doing with that, which is really creating a sense of belonging for all staff. Because we're spread across 4 buildings and we do a vast work, it is hard to feel like a team sometimes. And so that was something that was identified is how do we just continue to build early childhood as a department and make all of our staff feel valued and seen in the work they do. It's really easy for us to lean heavy on preschool because we have that in front of us every single day. And we don't want to forget the work that the rest of our team is doing and making sure that they feel included in that. And so we have self-created assessments that will go in partnership with our district assessments that will help us kind of narrow down and identify, do you feel like you belong in your building? Do you feel like you belong in a part of your classroom team or your team that you sit on that works with out in the community? And do you feel like you belong in our department? And do you have what you need for your work? So once we have our first round of surveys back, and so we'll start to dig into how we use that information to support staff. One thing that came up right away this fall was our staff meetings. There was a staff meeting that happened where we did an activity, and we got feedback from a staff member who said, I didn't have enough time to prepare. That was really overwhelming for me. So we've already adjusted to make sure that the agenda goes out before staff meetings and that if there is an activity, that person has a heads up. And we also made it very clear that staff can opt out if they're not comfortable. So we're trying to make sure that everybody feels seen and heard in their work. And that is all.
Thank you. Board members, do you have questions or comments?
I think I'd like to make a request for all of these skips that you bring some of those adorable children that you serve to the presentation.
We'd be happy to.
About how many students are involved in the early childhood programs?
So in preschool, we serve around 600 preschoolers each year. I'll let Jen speak to B3. In our family education, we serve quite a large portion of the population. Last year, I think when I pulled the numbers out of my brain, we had about 500 to 600 families who participated in birth through age 5 classes throughout the year for ECFE. And we serve about 30 to 45 children over at our family literacy program.
And the special ed portion of that, so in preschool, we typically start the year around 300 and we'll be over 450 by the end of the year just because we continue to get referrals and evaluations and children qualify. Birth to 3, we have probably 100 to 125 children in that age that are receiving services through the district.
That's impressive. Mr. Barlow.
The superintendent earlier had mentioned transportation. Out of curiosity, do you have any idea as to how many additional family students we could possibly serve if transportation were made available?
I think it's pretty significant. We get a lot of asks for it. I think we could probably, from the gen ed side that I can speak to, we could probably serve at least minimum 100 more students. I think that the requests are there, the students are there. We are really able to transport 4-year-olds right now, and so that leaves out the 3-year-olds who are in our programming, and a lot of 3-year-olds end up choosing other programming because we don't have the availability. It's a real barrier for families to be able to do things like go to work, get other children to school, and all of that. So I think we could really expand quite significantly if that were an option. It's our number one request.
And then two additional quick follow-ups. So it isn't always a matter of inability. It may be more a matter or issue of accessibility. And so I appreciate that concern you have and effort you have. I gave consideration to the family lever, and I thought how unique and innovative to where you're starting, or you have the capacity to honor and value the voice of parents and what they bring to the table, you know, versus potentially excluding them because they're maybe not a college graduate or and there's nothing wrong with being a doctor at the clinic, but they may not be a physician at the clinic. So I appreciate hearing the fact that you're encouraging that. And because I think parents care, they want to be a part of, and you're releasing them to do that, not just in the home, but in the classroom. So, you know, keep up the good work. Really appreciate that.
Ms. Nathan?
I was interested to hear a little bit more about the parent as expert
Yeah.
approach, because I know one of our district-wide goals is our family engagement work. And I remember being at a PAIR early childhood advisory committee meeting where we were talking and hearing from the parents of preschoolers about how empowered they felt and how much more equipped they felt to parent and guide their kids. And the conversation came up, well, where's PAIR for K through 12? So I'm wondering if there's anything that you can share with us about that family engagement piece that we might be able to keep in mind as we think about a district-wide approach to family engagement.
Yeah, we really focus on the parent as the child's main teacher. So it may not look like the academic skills that we provide in the classroom, but there are a lot of life skills that happen that are really honorable and that deserve to be recognized. And also people just have hobbies and talents that we want to focus on and utilize. So we do our best to bring that into our classroom. We do a lot of learning about things that children can explore in their natural environment. So we talk about trees and buildings and balls because every child can go home and see trees and buildings and balls and clothing. And so I am no seamstress. So I remember when I was in the classroom, I'd invite somebody in who could sew, who could even just help show what that machine looks like, because it's not my talent and it's not my hobby, but there's someone. And so I think thinking about the family as an expert in something you don't have, because we don't have to have it all.
Thank you. I actually have a question about the academic component of your work. You chose to focus on your learning environment goals and your staff engagement, or I would say collective efficacy goals, which are super critical, but I know you also have a really powerful agenda for kids educationally. Have you seen, as we certainly have in our elementary, middle, and high schools, an impact of the pandemic on students' readiness to do that early academic work? And you're nodding your head, so I'm not surprised. How are you thinking about dealing with that as we go forward?
We don't leave that alone, even though these are our two focus goals. We know that those components come. And so we are seeing an impact. We see that children are struggling to engage with peers like we used to. We see that there are some language delays and there are some things that we can just really beef up. So we're utilizing these tools. Like I said before, it's not that we're not using our curriculum. That's not why we're focusing on it. It's that we want to make sure that knowing that children have had these years that have been very impactful on their lives, that we're giving them the absolute best by making sure that we're really honing in on all that our tools have to offer.
And I'd like to add too about when you ask about the pandemic and the impact that's had on these children, it's huge. And we have, I've attended state meetings and they've talked about the number of special education referrals through Help Me Grow that have been submitted since the pandemic. And that's because numbers went way down, and now they're at the highest that they've ever been. In fact, I was at a meeting last week, and they said that the state of Minnesota had 3,800 more referrals in this last 6 weeks than they ever have these same 6 weeks in previous years. And so we know that it's impacting the entire state, probably in the entire country, that because children haven't been out, they haven't, maybe gone to their regular doctor appointments, all of a sudden we're getting all these referrals coming in, whether it's from families or, parents or neighbors or daycares or doctors, that they're all coming in because of missing that over the last couple of years.
And I really appreciate your raising that, and that it does tie especially to your staff belonging goal, because I had a meeting that Dan Kuhlman, our president of our Rochester Education Association, convened with an open meeting with teachers in this room yesterday, and it was a great discussion, and people were talking about how hard things are right now. And one of the things I felt a need to say is we are now dealing with supporting kids through the aftermath of a once-in-a-century pandemic, and that's not going to be a quick fix. And as teachers, mostly elementary, yesterday, though we had secondary there, we're saying I think we need to remind ourselves that this is not going to be a quick return to normalcy, because those kids, they have unfinished learning that's there. And if I might, Madam Chair, just one other question, Jen, for you. As we work with families of very young children who may be discovering that their child has a disability for the first time, how do we help those families through that process? I know we do it at high school and middle school as well, but that piece of helping parents understand what it means that their child has a disability and how we approach that from a strengths-based perspective. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, and especially our youngest learners, because we deal with everything right in the home in their natural environment. And so typically, the parents know about the referral coming in, so they know there are concerns, or they've seen things themselves that they know are different and not typical of a developing child. And so I think just being in the home and in the natural environment is a huge piece of getting parents to feel more at ease as we're talking to them. And, the EQUIP model that I mentioned earlier, it's evidence-based intervention practices, quality intervention practices. It's really about giving the power back to the parents and helping them to understand. So it's asking them questions, having them come up with things, solutions to, concerns that are going on. And we're just kind of talking them through it. So instead of saying, well, when my child was 3, this is what I did, it's, well, what has worked for you before? Or how long has that worked for you? Or what other things have you tried? And really getting them to come up with the ideas of what's going on themselves. And so I think too, just being in that home, having those personal conversations is really what helps them to understand what that means.
And I just have, go ahead, Ms. Workman.
Sort of building on what Dr. Pickell said, do you find that there's, that it's difficult at all to differentiate between what might be, say, a learning disability versus the impact of the pandemic?
Well, when we're looking at evaluating children that young, we're looking at different developmental areas, and we don't per se look for a learning disability, we look for a developmental delay. And so we're looking at one of these areas, whether it's cognitive or behavioral or functional or communication, whatever the area is that they have a delay in. And so what our hope is that our intervention is actually going to help them come back so that they can be developing at a typical level. And so children that qualify at that young of age does not mean they're going to have a disability for their entire lifetime. It means that they currently have a delay, and we're going to try to intervene to help catch them up.
Quick follow-up. So you're really suggesting that the children are all going to be treated the same in terms of their developmental delay, and some of those children might continue to have a developmental delay, whereas others will maybe benefit from that right away.
Sure. So the developmental delay, so from birth to 3, they have to qualify in one area, and then at age 3, they would either age out or they would qualify again for age 3 through 7 because they would have to qualify in 2 of those developmental areas. And then once they're in elementary school, if they're still having difficulty when it's time, so every 3 years we have to evaluate them. So if they're continuing to have difficulty, we will do the evaluation, and it's that point that we determine, is it a learning disability? Is it a cognitive delay? Is it a physical impairment? Is it a visual impairment? Whatever area that might be.
I understand your program is from birth to 5 years old.
Correct.
Can you give an example of what kind of programming you might have for a 9-month-old? I mean, you don't put that kid on a bus and say, see ya, pick you up after school.
And so really, it's very family focused. So when we're writing goals for the family, it's actually called an individual family service plan as opposed to an individual education plan when they're below 3 years old. And it's really working with the family and saying, what is your primary focus for your child? That might be that they're having difficulty eating. It might be that they can't understand what they're trying to get their wants and needs met. So it's really based on the family needs, and it's more of a coaching model for the parent as opposed to, we're not teaching the 9-year-old. We're working with the family and the parents and guardians to help them work with the child, because we know they're their primary teacher and they're the ones that are there 24/7.
I feel relieved, thank you.
Yeah, and I will just add that we, on the other side, have programming for families to attend with their 9-month-old in ECFE. So there are opportunities to have conversations with a parent educator, to meet with a public health nurse in some of our classes, and to help support that growth and development from the other side.
Awesome, thank you. I don't think we have any more questions, but you've given us a lot of really good information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
7.01, Annual Inventory of Fixed Assets Report. Dr. Piquel.
Chair Marvin, directors of the board, I'm pleased to ask John Carlson, our Executive Director of Finance and Technology, to come up for this item and the ensuing 2 items. And so get comfortable, John, you'll be here for a while. We're starting now with the fixed asset report.
All right, sounds good. And I'm hoping I'm not here that long, but we'll see how long this takes. So anyway, annual inventory of fixed assets, very exciting report. We gave it for the first time last year. We've been asked back for an encore performance. Actually, no, I think it's in policy. We're supposed to give you a report every year. So what are fixed assets? Fixed assets are those items that we buy that are over $5,000 each. So for example, a computer is not technically a fixed asset because it doesn't cost over $5,000. So it's the bigger things that we are buying. And then as far as land or building improvements, it's those projects that cost over $50,000. So what is our process? We have 2 FTE within the district. One's in the finance department, one's in the technology department. Now, what I just said about computers, even though they are not technically a fixed asset, we still do inventory them. We know where they are, we track them, and we find them, and we own them that way. But every year, these people go through all of our records and they make sure that we can account for all of the things that we have purchased over the long haul. Then we take and we apply depreciation to all of our fixed assets. Depreciation is just a recognition of what all of these items cost us on an annual basis. And theoretically, your depreciation would be the amount you'd be setting aside to replace the item again in the future when it wears out. So just to summarize what we have for fixed assets within the school district as far as land, and we hold land at the value that we paid for it. So a lot of this land in the school district was from way, way, way back, but if we were to add up the value of it, it would likely be more than $9 million. But $9 million is what we have on the books. We did not buy any new land and we did not dispose of any land in this last 1-year period. Land improvements are things that we make improve to the land. So typically those are playgrounds or they are parking lots. And so this year we added $4.4 million of either parking lot improvements or playgrounds. Buildings. We have been doing a lot of construction lately, and this year, within the 12-month period, we fully finished Overland Elementary School and we moved that into our building and put that on the books. So that $33 million, now we have $411 million of school buildings. Owned equipment, so these are all of these different things that we buy that, again, are over $5,000. And so we bought some of those things, and we also got rid of some of those things, about the same amount. So at the end of the year, we still have $20 million of owned equipment. Leased equipment are things that we, just what it says, we lease, so we do have to put these on our balance sheet now. That's part of what the GASB 87 restatement is. So we're just making sure that we have those accounted within our records. We have $2 million of leased equipment. So add all those up, and then one more thing that I didn't talk about, but the construction in process. So those are the amounts we've paid to date on all the projects that aren't fully finished as of last June 30th. So that was primarily the John Marshall Indoor Air Quality Project, completing Bishop, completing Longfellow, and completing Dakota. And so those should get finished now in this next year, and we'll add those into the building account when we get to next summer. But if you add all those things up, we have about $601 million worth of assets on the books. Depreciation then is just dividing, again, the useful life across all of these things. We don't depreciate land, but we depreciate everything else. We generally assume our school buildings are going to last 50 years, and then we assume other things like technology or other bigger things are about 5 years. And that is our annual fixed assets report for the year.
Ms. Nathan, I think, wants to ask you if you brought pictures of cute kids, but not,
did
you
not.
didn't? No? Okay. Questions? You do a really good job of that, Mr. Carlson. I mean, that's easy to understand and very specific, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was going to say, in board docs, there's 4 attachments. They have the line by line, page upon page of all of those things. So for complete transparency, if you want to look through what the value of all the things are, they are provided in board docs.
And those are available to anyone
That is
who wants
correct.
to check
And
in Board
I did have
Docs.
one comment. In one of those documents, I found it interesting that it's documented who they spoke to determine whether the asset had outlived its usable life and then what the disposal of it was. So to that level of detail, people can go see that we've done our due diligence on that.
Thanks.
Dr. Patel?
Thank you. We're now going to move on to item 7.02. This is a difficult report because, like almost every organization, we are seeing increases in healthcare costs that are difficult for our employees. They're difficult for our system. And I want to say before John gives an update that we know this is very challenging and that this board has sought to be as supportive as it can be of our employees in terms of compensation while being fiscally responsible. And it is very frustrating to see that gain in wages taken up by increased premium costs. We know that. I think over time, there's a strategic discussion for us to have as a system about the kind of healthcare we want to provide. We have great healthcare, and that's not surprising in the home of the Mayo Clinic. There are different choices we could make, and I know now is not the time to be having those discussions, and we would obviously have them in close partnership with all of our bargaining units that represent our employees. And this is a story that I actually will tell you from talking to superintendents around the state, we are actually in better shape than many that they're seeing with the premium increases. But I wish we weren't here in terms of looking at this, but we also know that keeping our staff healthy is a critical part of our support for them. So John will give you an overview of where we've come in this year. And I know this will be an ongoing issue of concern for the board in the years ahead. John.
Very good, thank you. Well, first off, we use this opportunity just to remind any of our employees so that they see communication about this, that they're going to be getting information about the open enrollment period where they have an opportunity once a year to change their benefits if they so desire. So that will be held October 28th to November 11th. And we plan to send out, like I said, more communication. There'll be something mailed to every employee's home to remind them. We'll also be sending out various emails. And then we are going to send out a little bit better communication than we did last year on why rates are changing so much this year. So that will be coming very soon too. Overall, if our employees don't want to change anything, we're going to follow now suit for the 3rd year in a row and not make our employees do anything. It was frustrating for our employees and our staff that work in the benefits department to track every staff member down every year and say, do you want to change or do you not want to change? And people would say, well, I didn't contact you because I didn't want anything changed. Well, you were supposed to contact us though. So we're now just saying, you get what you get if you don't tell us otherwise. All right, so health insurance, what's been going on? We experienced 116% of our projected claims in this last year, meaning we thought claims were going to be X, and they were 116% of that number. So they're 16% above where we thought. That's coming off a year where they were 105% in the previous year. Now, the prior year before that, it was a little bit better. It was below 100%, but 2 years over 100% is not good for any plan in the health insurance market, or any insurance market, really. Where we sit today is we have 1,994 employees that take healthcare coverage from the school district. Just for reference point, there are about 3,000 people that get a paycheck every payday here. And those include everybody from an athletic coach to a full-time teacher. So some of those employees actually don't qualify to get health coverage. That number is probably more around 2,300, 2,400. We've seen a great migration off our, I call it the low deductible plan, although it's not so low anymore, but the copay plan that's been around forever. Only 16% of our employees choose that now, but most people choose the high deductible with a health reimbursement account attached to it. So on top of having high claims, we are also continuing to expect inflation within the medical market. When you read things like Mayo Clinic is giving raises 6 to 9% to their employees, I don't think that means that our doctor bills and hospital bills will be going down. I think they'll only go up, and I'm not sure if 7.9% would even fully reflect what might happen. But be that as it may, that's what the experts tell us to plan for, is about 8% in medical costs, almost 9% in pharmacy costs. Very similar to what their projections were for this school year. What's really driving our claims, though, to be 116% is not just your normal checkup, go in for a quick exam, get a routine test or something. It's those claims that are over $50,000. And we had 157 of those compared to the experts would say a plan our size should have 116. So that means we had 41 incidents of claims, really big claims, of things that went really wrong for our employees or their family members. Now, we do limit our total out-of-pocket. We would never lose more than $500,000 on a single claim. We buy reinsurance or insurance on top of insurance to make sure that the plan doesn't pay out more than $500,000. We had 2 of those claims. That's actually exactly what we're supposed to have. So in one regard, our really, really bad claims were actually right where they're supposed to be, about 2 per year. All that to say, the Insurance Trust Committee, which Dr. Garcia is a member, we have the REA, the teacher group, send a member, I'm a member, and we have 2 outside community members on this as well. Heard all the data and agreed to raise premiums in total 13%. Now, the committee decided not to apply that in the same percentage to every plan, applied less to the qualified high deductible plan as compared to the copay plan. Generally, as Dr. Piquel was saying, our strategy has been the district will cover $780 per month towards single coverage, or $1,311 for family coverage. We have that in almost all of our employee agreements. We have not gotten that in yet for the cabinet, for the principals, for student nutrition services, or our maintenance groups. We're working on all of those to get them up to that amount very soon. So here's how it's going to play out. These are just the employee share. When I said 13% before, 13% is the overall increase on the whole premium. So if the premium was $1,000 a month between the employer share and the employee share, then 13% on top of that would have been $130. Because we have these caps in place to limit the liability of the employer side, all of that increase ends up falling to the employee. And so our employees who choose the copay plan, who are used to paying $256 a month, will now pay $396 a month. So $140 a month increase. If they're on family coverage, it's going to go up from $822 to $1,163, an increase of $341 a month. Again, that's the employee share. This is our most popular plan. Those rates are going up $92 a month for single or $232 a month for family. And then I would suspect more of our employees will ultimately shift into this plan, the qualified high deductible plan with the health savings account attached. That's going up $84 a month for single, $205 for family. Now, a little bit of good news. Our dental plan runs very efficient and very good, and our claims were 95% of what were budgeted or planned. More employees take dental than health. There's 2,400 employees in this compared to 2,000 in the health. The experts tell us that dental providers will raise their rates about 4.1% next year compared to about 6% for this year. And the dental or the insurance trust committee decided to raise rates 4%. In all of our employee agreements, the district pays $50 a month towards single coverage or $115 for family. And so how this will play out is our single rate is actually fully covered within the $50, and then our families will increase by $5 a month. So it'll be $10 a month out of paychecks. A lot of heavy news in there. And again, the insurance trust committee is not exactly happy about this either when you look at some of these numbers. This is our most popular plan, and seeing that if you're a family, you need to budget $639 out of your paycheck, so about $320 a paycheck, because we get paid twice a month.
Thank you. Questions or comments for Mr. Carlson? Ms. Amundson?
Are we going to be doing anything special to communicate with our employees about?
Yes, that is what we started working on that. Mum Sue in our communications department is working on she took all this information from me either yesterday or this morning. I think it was yesterday. And she's trying to put this into words that are hopefully easier to understand than how I've just explained them, but just to kind of talk about what's been going on, what's been happening, and how this is going to impact their paycheck.
And so if employees are interested in changing plans, I imagine there's good explanation of their options and.
That's all going to be covered too within the open enrollment communication. So it will be important for employees to pay attention to that. Again, they'll get a mailer at their home reminding them on it. They'll be reminded in Skyward, and they'll get emails from us about it too, multiple emails.
Ms. Workman?
What, if anything, could the district do more to contain these costs? Or are we simply being buffeted by what's happening
Yeah.
outside?
To Dr. Pakel's point, I checked in with somebody I trust locally and who manages multiple school district plans, and he said they're seeing 12 to 50% increases in the region. So right away, I reframed 13% as not feeling as bad, but it is still not good. Containing costs is all about trying to make sure we have the right mix of people, healthy people versus not healthy people in the plan. We'd like to actually try to recruit more healthy people into the plan to help pay premiums in and spread out the cost. But yeah, it's looking for those cost containment measures. Are there anything we can do as far as which providers you can go to? Unfortunately, when you do that, you might start saying, well, then you can't go to that clinic, you have to go to this clinic. And I don't think a lot of us want that type of restriction per se, but some might be willing to take it for lower cost.
I haven't kept up on any of our wellness programs, but are employees ever offered sort of an incentive if they participate in wellness programs to, help mitigate their health concerns?
We used to have, if you would go work out 12 times a month, you'd get a small reimbursement, I think up to $20 a month. That unfortunately was sunset by Blue Cross and by us, so administratively it'd be hard to figure that out. But no, we don't have any other incentives, like if you fill out this questionnaire. I know some
Right, no,
employers have done
right.
that,
Well-
so that might be something we could look at to say, could that be an option for employees to earn back some credit?
Ms. Amundson?
I just wanted to clarify something that you said about recruiting healthy people to join. You're not talking about hiring practices,
No,
right?
not hiring
I
practices
just wanted
at
to
all.
make sure that wasn't misinterpreted.
What I was trying to relay there is we have 3,000 people getting a paycheck, 2,000 people taking the plan. We would like to see actually more of those 1,000 that aren't taking the plan come into the plan.
Right.
that would be the.
Just wanted to be really clear about that.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Really.
Do we have any idea why those 1,000 people aren't taking the plan?
It could be our pricing.
Spouses?
There's also been a spousal surcharge we've had in place that have penalized families. We're actually going to take that off of our plan going forward. So yes, it could be a mix of the coverage, the price, the spousal surcharge that's been in place. So we're looking at all those things to make sure that our plan is actually attractive and people would want to be in it.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
You're welcome.
And then apparently you are going to be briefing us on 7.03 enrollment update. Dr. Raquel?
Dr. Marvin, the directors of the board, after 30 years of pretty steady increase in K through 12 enrollment all around the country, we are seeing what demographers are predicting will be a sea change in K-12 enrollment broadly, related primarily to changes in birth rates, reduced immigration, and at least in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, some families choosing other options for their children. And so enrollment is an issue of great concern everywhere. We last year did a full scrub of our enrollment projections with an external firm to be sure that we were getting fresh eyes on the problem. And as board members will remember, they gave us 4 possible paths and gave us a recommended path, which was modest decline, and it was a conservative path. And we adopted that and built the budget on it. And as John will update you on now, we've actually come in better than that projection, and I think we should take heart about that. But I don't think that is where we want to remain. We want to be the provider of choice for families in Rochester, surrounding communities, and through RPS Online beyond that. And so I'm confident that everything we're going to be doing through the strategic plan is squarely aimed at meeting those needs. In the meantime, we need to carefully monitor enrollment, and so John is going to give us a sense of where we have actually come in this school year.
Thank you very much. You did a great job of summarizing that. Appreciate it. Our actual enrollment was 17,729 on October 3rd. That was the first Monday in October. That is down 71 kids from the same point last year. But if you look one more column to the right there, it was 87 higher than what we projected. So in other words, we built the budget, assuming 17,642 students, and we came in at 17,729. It was within 0.5% of what we had projected, and if you kind of look at that variance by percent column, we're usually within plus or minus 0.5% one way or the other. That's been our historical average minus that 1 year, October of 2020. So if we take a step back, our high point in the last decade was 18,296, and we're at 17,729 today.
Questions?
Maybe I'll just point out, we don't get paid based on this October number. We do this just as a year over year, pick the same day and tell you where we are on that exact same day, or very close to it within a day or two. But we actually get paid based on the number of kids enrolled every day of the school year. So one day you have 17,780, and the next day you have 17,779. MDE is actually prorating day by day by day as you go. Really, this date is immaterial as far as what we're going to earn for revenue.
So that's by enrolled students.
By enrolled.
You're not counting students who are out of school because they're sick.
That's true.
Enrolled, okay.
Correct, enrolled. So you are enrolled, and if you take a sick day, and you're out or you're absent, that is not counted against our revenue. I think there's we call it the 15-day drop. So if you are out of school for more than 15 consecutive days, you are dropped from enrollment. You basically have to re-enroll at that point. And so then that's when payments stop for that student.
And not asking you to predict something you don't know, but in general, how much variation from this number do we see from October to the end of the year? Are we adding kids?
It goes both ways. We have had it go up from here, like we did in the fall from October 2020 to when we finished in the spring of 2021. We were higher than that number. Last year, I think we were down just a little bit from that number. For budgeting purposes, we assume 98.5%. So we assume that 1.5% throughout the year, there's going to be some fluctuation there. So we just don't want to over budget on the revenue and then be short at the end of the year.
Mr. Brown.
I appreciate the superintendent mentioning that there are contributing factors. such as a decline in birth rates and change in immigration patterns, things that perhaps in years past have contributed to the growth we experienced as a district. The county oftentimes provides to us a lens at the birth rates. Do you know if they're projecting, how far out do they usually project or provide their birth?
I believe we did a little bit of projecting within our last enrollment study, and I don't think we were projecting it going up.
It was flat, which is puzzling because we're predicting population growth in Rochester. Right now, it's not a projection for higher birth rates. And so that's a bit of a head scratcher because we know this community is growing, there's expecting significant job growth, but at least thus far, it's not translating into projected increases in Olmsted County birth rates. So this is something that we really need to continually be watching very closely. And I appreciate, Dr. Barlow, you mentioning the need to be talking to experts about these things. This is, some school districts have a full-time researcher who just does enrollment projections. We obviously don't have that luxury, but we need to be really reaching out to our county and also the city of Rochester to try and understand where they are seeing future resident growth and understanding where are the kids, because we want to be reaching out to them.
Well, I will speak, I suppose, for my generation as a millennial. Like, we don't have the money to have children because we have lots of student loans, and we're also taking care of our aging and elderly parents. So, you know, I'm sorry about that. And I also think too, like, speaking back to the previous item, if we're talking about like companies or employers not providing adequate health care because the healthcare system is consistently raising prices, and then somebody who works in a healthcare system is not being reimbursed at a rate that is livable to me, like, I think we will probably just continue to see that stagnation. You know, I'm almost 37 and I don't have children and I still have student loans, and I have a couple of aging parents and grandparents on my back as well. So I can imagine a city like Rochester draws someone like me or those just younger, but we're not coming here to have children.
Thank you for sharing that info. That puts a face on it.
Just
I-
FYI.
No pressure.
Thank you for
I
that,
mean, maybe I'll
Dr.
have a few, but you know, they're like 20, 30 something, 20, I don't know, however long it will take them. I guess maybe we'll do early childhood.
Thank you,
care.
Dr. Garcia. I think that's a really important point, but I do want to point out that every time you were talking about taking care of aging and elderly parents, you were looking directly at me. And I find that at once offensive and also appropriate.
Just come on over. Take care of each other.
Okay, anything else for Mr. Carlson?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. We will move then to 8.01, Policy Committee meeting recommendations from October 6th and the 14th, and the Policy Committee will handle this.
So periodically throughout the year, the Minnesota School Board Association does a batch update of their model policies, mostly to reflect what happened during the last legislative session, once they've worked through the changes in statute and subjected it to some legal review, and they send it to us for updates. So that's what many of these reflect. And I'll start with Policy 410, the Family and Medical Leave Policy. The purpose of this policy is to provide for family and medical leave to school district employees in accordance with the Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993, and also with parenting leave under state law. And I think my fellow policy committee members, we can leave off the saying every time that it's updates from MSBA model policy and grammar punctuation changes, because it is the same in every policy. So the second one is Policy 415, mandated reporting of maltreatment of vulnerable adults. The purpose of this policy is to make clear the statutory requirements of school personnel to report suspected maltreatment of vulnerable adults.
And policy 416 is drug and alcohol testing. It provides authority so that the school board may require all employees and/or job applicants to submit to drug and alcohol testing in accordance with the provisions of the policy as provided in federal law and Minnesota statutes. And then policy 417, which is chemical use and abuse. The purpose is to assist the school district in its goal to prevent chemical use and abuse by providing procedures for education and intervention.
Policy 418 is concerned with a drug-free workplace and drug-free schools. It's to maintain a safe and healthful environment for employees and students by prohibiting the use of alcohol, toxic substances, medical cannabis, non-intoxicant cannabinoids,
That's a hard one.
including edible cannabinoid products and controlled substances without a physician's prescription. Policy 515, protection and privacy of pupil records. The school district recognizes its responsibility in regard to the collection, maintenance, and dissemination of pupil records and the protection of the privacy rights of students as provided in federal law and state statutes.
Policy 524, Internet Acceptable Use and Safety Policy. The purpose of this policy is to establish requirements, expectations, and guidelines for access to the use of electronic technology. Policy 603, Curriculum Development. The purpose of this policy is to provide direction for continuous review and improvement of the district curriculum.
And policy 604 is about instructional curriculum. The purpose is to provide for the development of course offerings for students. And then policy 708 is transportation of non-public school students. And the purpose is to address transportation rights of non-public school students and to provide equality of treatment in transporting such students pursuant to law.
Policy 709, more on student transportation. This policy discusses the safety, providing safe transportation for students and to educate students on safety issues and the responsibilities of school bus ridership. Policy 721, uniform grant guidance policy regarding federal revenue sources. The purpose of this policy is to ensure compliance with the requirements of the federal uniform grant guidance regulations by establishing uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements for federal grant awards received by the school district.
And policy 722, Public Data Requests. The school district recognizes its responsibility relative to the collection, maintenance, and dissemination of public data as provided in state statutes. So this is the first briefing. We'll have another briefing, and then they'll be placed on the consent agenda. I will note that there are a few procedures associated with these policies that are under development, and would bring them to the board at a later date under a separate agenda item.
Thank you. Policy Committee also has policy 8.02, and this is one that they would like to recommend that the board take action on. Ms. Nathan?
We received some information about the passage of a law, Steve's Law, which is also known as the Good Samaritan Law, and it provides limited protections to people who call 911 and/or administer, I knew I was going to, naloxone, Narcan, in response to a suspected or known drug overdose. And we were contacted by our health services staff with a request that we put this in policy so that we can then put Narcan in our buildings alongside other emergency equipment like our defibrillators and tourniquets and other first aid kits. So the language in the policy allows the district to obtain and possess Narcan and be maintained and administered by trained school staff to a student or other individual if it is determined in good faith that the person has experienced an opioid overdose. It provides the language of the statute that allows us to do that. And it provides immunity for the individual who is providing the medication. And it also provides for some of the procedures about the medical order, how it is labeled and stored, and then the training requirements. And then beyond this policy, there will be additional training of all the staff who would have access to this to be provided. And as Chair Marvin said, our policy 208 says that in the case of an emergency, a new or modified policy may be adopted by the majority vote of a quorum of the school board. A statement regarding the emergency and the need for immediate adoption of the policy shall be included in the minutes. Because student, staff, and visitors are already present in Rochester Public Schools on a daily basis and an emergency could occur at any time, the policy committee is recommending that this policy be moved to action at tonight's meeting, and we recommend approval.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to move this to action. If we move it to action, then we can have discussion on it. All those in favor of moving this to action, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is now an action item, and I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved, the School Board of Independent School District 535 accept the recommendations of the Policy Committee for Policy 516, Student Medication. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
It's not that we've had, to my knowledge, a overdose or student or staff in need of this medication. This is more preemptive, is that correct?
And what our health services staff is hearing about trends in the availability of fentanyl and some of the other opioids, better to be prepared.
Sure. And I definitely appreciate the foresight of our medical professionals who happen to be district employees, and I fully support the approval of this policy.
Thank you. And we have one of our medical professionals here, and if you'd like to approach, if you'd be willing to come up and answer questions, thank you so much. If you could just tell the audience who you are and what your position is with the district.
Good evening. I'm Leah Bancroft. I'm our coordinator of health services. So this is something we've been watching over time, I think, for the last several years in looking at unconscious victims or students or individuals in our buildings who potentially were having substance abuse and overdose. What we know in the city is we have a quick response with our EMS teams. Our SROs also have Narcan or naloxone on their rigs. And so we've been watching, and we hadn't really found the data that showed we could have had it if we would have used, or if we had it, we would have used it. What we have noticed, though, and you've probably seen in the media, the trends with the increase in fentanyl and our opioid overdoses, we have sensed it change this year. We have had a couple of instances in our buildings where we have suspected overdose and potential opioid overdose. We're hearing from some of our students who use THC in their vape pens, they don't know what's in there, so potentially it could be laced. So you'll look at the trends over the state, I think nation, a lot of my state colleagues are also implementing similar plans because it's time. I think we need to have it. The really great thing about Narcan is it's nasal. They do have the injectable form, which our policy will cover because we say naloxone in there as well. But to be able to train staff in our buildings, the nasal, the form of it, Narcan, which is the brand, is really helpful. So we have a standing order. I think you received that already. The Steve Rumler Hope Network is doing a really great job to push us into high schools. And so we already have en route to us doses that will go into our high schools. And so our teams are putting together a plan for implementation and procedure, and then we will go and train staff. And it makes sense for us to house this where our emergency equipment is. So we're looking at where our AEDs, our tourniquets. The kits themselves actually have 2 doses in them. They also have gloves. They have the visual aid as how to administer, and they also have a plastic face shield if you were to do rescue breaths, if they became unconscious and not breathing.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Bancroft? Ms. Amundson?
And is there a plan to also expand to our non-high school buildings for the purposes of parents
Yes.
or,
Yep.
or visiting public?
Yeah, right now, I think the policy draft as it's written is for, we're training our staff. So when I think the community events that we have, it would be how do we train staff? How do we look at that portion of it? I think right now, the Steve Remler Network that we're working with provides this to us free of charge. And they have a medical director that writes that standing order for us, and it is focused on the high schools. That's not to say that we can't expand that into our other buildings, and I think we would certainly keep that on the table for further discussion.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment. I appreciate that you are bringing this forward, and a couple of our student-run groups in the community have been lobbying us for something like this for some time now. And I appreciate adding in the background information, the language that says that a person who is not a healthcare professional who acts in good faith in administering an opiate antagonist naloxone is another person whom the person believes in good faith to be suffering a drug overdose, is immune for criminal prosecution for the act, and is not liable for any civil damages or acts or omissions resulting from the act. So just knowing that, I think it will also help after, obviously, the training, but I think it will reduce the hesitancy for others to act if they notice that, somebody is potentially presenting with symptoms of overdose.
And that will be part of the training too, is making sure our staff would understand what that would look like, what those symptoms could look like. And then just as far as the medication goes, the side effects are not harmful. If we were to give this in an overdose situation where there's an unconscious student and we weren't sure if this was laced with fentanyl or an opioid, it's not going to harm them by administering that medication.
Thank you. If there are no other questions,
Move approval.
Second.
I think it's already been moved and seconded.
No,
No,
move to action.
No, it was moved to action when I read the resolution.
Now we're
Second.
voting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can
I
ask
thought
us.
after I read it, it was moved and seconded. Anyway, it's been moved and seconded again. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you, Leah.
Appreciate that. We have in front of you and on board docs the annual board calendar, noting that we will have a regular board meeting on November 1st. On November 15th, we'll have a study session, and just before that, we will certify the results of the school board election. And then on November 22nd, we will have a regular school board meeting at 5:30. Are there any issues that board members would like the board to consider to put on a future agenda? All right, hearing none. This regular meeting will be moving to a closed session as permitted by Minnesota Statute 13D.05, Subdivision 3A, to discuss ongoing labor negotiations. Following the closed session in the Edison Board Conference Room, we will return to the board table. Do I have a motion to recess for this purpose?
So move. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are in recess at 6:43 PM.
Michelle crazy, and 3 of us seconded.
Reconvened at 6:57 PM. Clerk Barlow, will you please read the names of those present in the closed session?
Present were Dr. Jane Marvin, School Board, Dr. Jessica Garcia, School Board, John Carlson, Finance, Dr. Kent McHale, Superintendent, Don Barlow, School Board, Melissa Atkinson, School Board, Julie Workman, School Board, and Carl Bach, and Human Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. And we have a resolution. Be it resolved, School Board of Independent School District 535 does hereby ratify the 2022-2024 collective bargaining agreement between the Rochester Public Schools and the clerical employees.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved, and we are adjourned at 6:58.
Whoa.